My name is Sophia Williams. I am 28 years old and I am 3 days away from marrying the man I love the most, Ethan Blackwood. Everything seemed perfect until his wealthy parents suddenly presented me with a prenuptial agreement and a very strict requirement: sign it or the wedding is over. They did not expect that behind my simple appearance was a successful businessman with a fortune of up to $9 million and uncompromising determination. Their arrogant faces were about to meet the one person they truly respect: money. Please share where you are following this story in the comments. If you love stories about people who are overlooked and turn things around, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to join me on this journey, a journey against the current to erase those contemptuous smiles. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Chicago, where my parents were high school teachers and taught me the values of education and hard work. We were well off, but not rich. Every penny of college tuition came from scholarships that I paid for with sleepless nights and excellent academic performance. I graduated from Northwestern with a degree in computer science and dove headfirst into the tech world, eager to succeed on my own terms. My grandfather was my biggest supporter. When he passed away during my senior year of college, he left me an unexpected inheritance. His frugal lifestyle hid decades of smart investments that grew his fortune to $7 million, which he passed on to me. I invested the majority and used a small portion to start an education software startup. By age 26, the company had grown by $2 million, bringing my net worth to $9 million. But no one would have known it by looking at me. I live in a modest apartment, drive a sensible car, and dress modestly but not extravagantly. I want to succeed or fail based on my abilities, not my bank account. My net worth is a private secret known only to my parents, my best friend Jenna, and my financial advisors. I met Ethan at a charity dinner supporting educational programs for underprivileged children. My company had sponsored the software, and I was representing the donation. Ethan came because the Blackwoods were always present at important social events. He stood out not only because of his tall stature and warm brown eyes, but also because of his sincerity towards the cause of the party. We chatted easily about educational inequality, favorite hiking trails, and our love of spicy Thai food. When he asked for my number, I didn't hesitate, even though I knew his family background. The Blackwoods were a wealthy, old Chicago family whose law firm represented many powerful businesses. Our first date was a picnic in Millennium Park. Ethan brought homemade bread and admitted that he had researched my company online and was impressed. That was Ethan, careful but sincere. We became inseparable, with weekend getaways, failed cooking sessions in my kitchen, intellectual debates that lasted until dawn, and a deep intimate connection that made everything else disappear. He did not flaunt his wealth, nor did I. Money was not important in the life we built together. He loved my passion for work and my independence. I appreciated his sense of justice and fairness in the law, despite his wealthy upbringing. When he took me to meet his parents after 6 months, I noticed the first signs of a rift. The Blackwood mansion was large in the most exclusive part of Lake Forest, with meticulously manicured gardens and a house that could accommodate 8 families. Richard and Victoria Blackwood were polite but coldly appraising. Victoria was especially good at asking questions that were disguised as light but still tried to probe my background. "Northwestern is a good school," she said over dinner. "Is the scholarship program adequate? Your parents are both teachers. An admirable profession, though I suppose financial hardship is inevitable." Ethan either ignored or chose to ignore these hints. He was the youngest of 3 children, accustomed to dealing with his mother with tact. His father was more direct, but still ignored me in the focused conversation, talking only about things Ethan knew, leaving me out. Still, I loved him, and his frustrations were small compared to the joy he brought. When he proposed on our second anniversary on a sunset cruise on Lake Michigan, I said yes. His grandmother's ring, an elegant emerald that fit my finger perfectly. The wedding planning had started out as a dream, but cracks were starting to show in the foundation. Victoria was involved in everything from the venue to the flowers, never really talking about money, but it was implicitly understood that Blackwood would foot the bill because I clearly couldn't afford a wedding worthy of their son. I didn't correct that misunderstanding, keeping my finances a secret out of pride and not wanting to compete over money. Ethan tried to be conciliatory, siding with me when necessary but also asking me to compromise. I often compromised more because the small details were less important than marrying him. When Victoria added 50 family friends to the guest list, I agreed. When she criticized my wedding cake choice as rustic and ordered a lavish 7-tiered cake from a famous bakery, I let it slide. The only thing I insisted on was the wedding dress, a modern design that made me feel beautiful and confident. Even that became the subject of her insinuations that she had chosen it for the sake of saving, not necessarily because she liked it. The wedding was approaching. I felt like a stranger at my own engagement, but consoled myself that after the wedding, he and I would build our own home away from the influence of our families. We chose to live in a downtown apartment near work, although his mother implied that we would live in the residential area of Blackwood. 3 days before the wedding, everything was in full swing. The venue was set, the flowers arranged, the menu finalized. I had just confirmed with the photographer when Victoria called to invite me for afternoon tea that day. Ethan had been in meetings all day, she said, and wanted me to talk to her alone before the wedding. Looking back, I should have detected the artificial sweetness in her voice, but I was exhausted and stressed, seeing it as an opportunity to connect with my future mother-in-law. Little did I know that I was walking into an ambush that would test both my patience and the foundation of my relationship with Ethan's family. Blackwood House was magnificent in the clear Wednesday sun. The stone facade gleamed, the circular driveway immaculate. As I pulled into the courtyard in my modest Audi, I saw Richard's Mercedes parked there, a surprise since Victoria had not said he would be there. The maid, Marta, opened the door and led me to the formal drawing room instead of the morning room where Victoria usually received guests. Another foreshadowing that I only realized later. Victoria and Richard sat there, dressed as if they were going to a business meeting rather than a friendly tea party. Victoria wore a sophisticated navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and Richard wore a traditional charcoal gray suit with family crest cufflinks. "Sophia, thank you for coming in so suddenly," Victoria said with a half-smile. "Please sit." I sat across from her, suddenly feeling more like I was at a job interview than a family visit. The tea set on the table remained untouched. "We need to discuss a few things before the wedding," Richard said bluntly. "Business matters need to be settled first to ensure smooth sailing later." Victoria nodded. "Every successful marriage is based on clarity of expectations and agreements." My heart sank. "What is there to discuss?" I asked, my heart cooling at the feeling that this was going to be unpleasant. Richard took a thick, blue-bound document from his briefcase and placed it in front of me. "This is the prenuptial agreement that our family lawyer drafted. It protects family assets and stipulates what happens if the marriage fails." I didn't rush to get the document. "This is the first time I've heard of prenuptial," I said cautiously. Ethan and I have never discussed it. He understands, Victoria interjected. Our family has a large estate that has been protected for generations. It's just a formality everyone has to sign when entering the Blackwood household. That makes me suspicious. Ethan's brother married a banker, his sister married a politician. Not everyone needs a prenuptial to protect their assets. I flipped through the document and realized it was not balanced at all. It included provisions that would leave me virtually penniless in the event of a divorce, regardless of time or contributions. Assets acquired during the marriage belonged to Ethan, and intellectual property provisions related to my company were also affected. The material is too one-sided, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Richard waved his hand in denial. That's standard language for protecting family assets. You must understand, the Blackwood fortune is a multi-generational legacy. What about my assets? I asked, about the company and intellectual property. Victoria sneered. Your educational software is cute, but we're talking about a fortune. Her voice was full of contempt. In their eyes, I was an inferior, and should be grateful to have a wealthy family to rely on. The suggestion of adding terms to my company was also contempt. We can add a clause about your company, Richard said generously. Even if we divorce, Ethan will be generous without legalities. He often helps the weak. My face burned, but I tried to keep calm. When do I have to sign? I asked. Today is best. Victoria pulled out a Mont Blanc pen from her pocket. The wedding is in 3 days. I want to finish this first. I put the documents down carefully. I need to have my own lawyer look at it first. Richard raised an eyebrow. Is having a personal attorney really necessary? Our attorney is the best in Chicago. I replied, it's just that whoever drafts it has the advantage. My lawyer represents me. Victoria started to get irritated. Sophia, this procedure is common now. Everyone signs it. I need 24 hours to get a lawyer to look at it, I said. Richard and Victoria looked at each other. We have to settle this today, Richard insisted. You mean we have to sign without legal advice today or the wedding will be cancelled? I asked clearly. Victoria coldly said, the Blackwood family has an unchangeable request. Ethan understands. If you truly love him, you will understand too. Sign or cancel. The words hung in the air. I looked at Richard and Victoria, certain of their power. To them, I was nothing but a choice between losing everything or leaving the one I loved, because I was lied to. I stood up, grabbing the documents. I have to talk to Ethan. Victoria said indifferently, he already knows that position. He may be shy to talk to you directly, but he understands family responsibilities. This hurt the most. It turned out Ethan knew but didn't tell me. I need to talk to him before I decide. Richard also stood up, adjusting his suit. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. We need your signature or the decision to cancel the wedding. I hope you choose wisely. Victoria ended coldly, Ethan loves you very much. It would be a pity to hurt him over such a small matter. I nodded, stepping out of the car feeling as if I was carrying a heavy load. As I walked out of the Blackwood gate, tears began to fall. As I drove home, the posh streets melted into the familiar urban landscape. I had to pull over twice because I couldn't see clearly in front of me. The phone rang 4 times, Ethan's name flashing on the screen. I didn't answer, needing time to think. Thinking of Victoria's scrutiny of the car I drove, Richard's disdain for my business model, and other instances where I was undervalued simply because of my middle-class background. I now understood it was a system of discrimination. When I got home, I called my best friend Jenna. She was furious about Blackwood's actions. I told her what had happened, saying that it hurt me that my boyfriend knew but didn't dare say anything. Jenna asked about the contract. I told her that it was a very unfavorable document, including a clause that targeted my intellectual property, which was completely unacceptable. She told me to call Harold, my lawyer, who had been in charge of my case since my grandfather was alive. I promised I would. But first, I had to talk to Ethan. When I called him back, he picked up right away. He asked me why I was upset and worried. I told him straight up that his parents had ambushed me with the contract and asked me to sign it or cancel the wedding, and told him I knew. His silence said a lot. He admitted that he didn't expect his parents to attack me like that, said he would tell me but delayed because he was afraid of worrying me. I was angry. You knew and let them set me up as prey? Protect me? No, that's cowardice. He said I was overreacting, got angry, and said the contract was just a common legal document that everyone signed. I challenged him to read it carefully. He confessed that he hadn't read it carefully because his father said it was a common family model, an unchangeable standard. I read aloud the clause about intellectual property that could affect my company. He was also surprised, and argued that his father couldn't allow that. I said I needed time to think and asked him whose side he would choose, his parents or mine. He protested that it was unfair, that he loved his family but also loved me. I asked who I would be in his eyes in 3 days between the two sides. He couldn't answer. I said I would call him tomorrow and hung up. I sat in my apartment with the phone still in my hand, tears threatening to fall, then turning to disbelief and determination. If the Blackwoods thought this was about money and power, I would show them I had both. I opened my laptop and checked my financial records. The $7.5 million inheritance had grown through careful investing, and the $1.5 million company value put my net worth at about $9 million. Not Blackwood money, but enough to make a difference. I kept it a secret from my parents, Jenna, and Harold, the lawyer. Now it was time to let the truth out. I texted Harold that I needed an urgent meeting at 7 a.m. to sort out the pre-wedding contract in 3 days. He replied promptly that he would be there on time, with all the relevant paperwork. I lay awake that night, torn between anger and anxiety, but the next morning I was ready. In the office, I wore a charcoal gray power suit, my hair pulled back, my grandfather's pearls reminding me of values and perseverance. Harold, a 72-year-old lawyer with 45 years of experience, read the contract and his face grew serious. He said it was the most one-sided contract he had ever seen. I asked him if he could fight it. He smiled, confident that he would not only oppose it but replace it with a fair document that would protect my rights. We sat down for 2 hours, drafting a new prenuptial agreement that was fair, protected both parties' assets and intellectual property, and Harold also advised on the presentation. I planned to meet Ethan privately first, then go with him to convince my parents at a neutral place, the fancy Lakeview restaurant. After more than an hour of getting ready, I called Jenna for an update. She was surprised but supportive because I couldn't keep the mask on forever. We both knew it would take some trust. It was time to meet Ethan at Carlucci's, the fancy Italian place where we'd celebrated our first anniversary. I arrived early and chose a table in a quiet corner. Ethan arrived on time, visibly exhausted. He apologized for hurting my parents, saying he had talked to them but to no avail. I asked how they reacted and he said his father called him weak and his mother cried because he chose an outsider. But he disagreed, protested vehemently, and refused to comply with their unreasonable request. He promised to call all the guests if the wedding was cancelled because of that. I couldn't help but feel proud. He said he'd spent the night at a friend's house thinking about the new family contract, thinking it was too forced. I decided to reveal my secret. I wasn't poor. I sent him the financial reports. My grandfather left over $7 million and a company worth $1.5 million. He was shocked. He asked why I didn't tell him sooner. I explained that I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for money. He was shocked and admitted that there was a lack of transparency between us. We read the new fair contract I drafted together, and he confirmed that it was a fair agreement that protected both parties equally. I said I wanted a marriage based on equality and respect, not being the darling of a rich family. He took my hand and agreed to face my parents tomorrow and help them understand that things had to change. We chose the Lakeview Restaurant, a private, upscale place to meet Richard and Victoria. Ethan's parents arrived late, as expected. We seriously presented that the old contract was unacceptable because it was too overwhelming for us, and presented a new contract and financial records. The truth of $9 million was a big shock. Richard and Victoria were shocked and had to admit that they had to reconsider everything when they learned that I was not the common fool they had thought. Victoria said she found it strange that I had hidden my wealth, and Richard commented that he still had to think carefully. Ethan sided with me and questioned my parents' behavior. Victoria said they were just protecting their family, but I could see that they were using money to control the relationship. Ethan said it had to stop. The talks were tense but eventually led to agreement on a new contract and a review period. Victoria was accommodating, saying she might have misjudged me, though she didn't entirely agree. Richard admitted he had to be more fair-minded now. At the end of the meeting, Richard shook my hand, called me a worthy opponent, and promised future cooperation. Victoria greeted me with more respect than before. Ethan and I left the restaurant feeling united, stronger in our relationship, ready to face the challenges of family together. 2 days later, I wore a modern wedding dress and signed a balanced contract with the Blackwood family. The wedding took place at the Drake Hotel with more than 200 guests, full of emotion. Victoria appeared in a light blue dress, came to congratulate me and gave me a pair of sapphire earrings. A family heirloom reminiscent of the resilient woman who saved the Blackwood family from the Great Depression. Together with my father, who was proud and emotional, I entered a new life, instead of being an outsider, now part of a real family. After our wedding and honeymoon in Greece, Ethan and I established clear boundaries with our families and lived together under the same roof of our mutual choice. Relations with my in-laws also gradually changed positively. Victoria accepted that we did not participate in regular family activities, and Richard showed respect for my opinion when I was invited to consult for the family law firm. The prenuptial agreement is tucked away, never expected to be used, but it is a symbol of equality in our marriage. Looking back on the tumultuous time leading up to our wedding, I know that confrontation and honesty paved the way for a solid foundation that convenience could not have provided. I learned that hiding parts of myself, even for good reasons, can cause ripples. Ethan learned to stand up to family pressure for love. My spirit as money is not to control others but to be independent and move forward. Marriage is a blend of two philosophies, two approaches to money, family, and career. To get along, you need constant communication, respect, and a firm commitment to your core values, while also making small concessions. 3 days before the wedding, I could have easily signed a contract to avoid trouble, or given up on love. I chose the harder path, facing the truth, facing fairness and respect. That determined how Ethan and I built our future with his family, a relationship of equality and respect. I want to know if you have ever stood up when you were underestimated. Have you ever shown your true worth? Tell your story in the comments. If this story touches you, please support me by liking and subscribing to the channel to experience more stories of victory and change with me. Thank you for being there. Remember, sometimes the greatest strength is not letting yourself be less than you truly are.